Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the webinar today in the middle of Food Waste Action Week. As part of our collective contribution to this, the partners, the SRA, the Food Too Good To Go, UK Hospitality, Winnow, and RAP's Guardians of Grub have brought together some excellent speakers to discuss food waste in hospitality and food service, and specifically reopening right, eliminating food waste to protect your profit and our planet. My name is Richard Swanell. I'm RAP's Director for the International Work, and it's my pleasure to be your host today for today's webinar. Now, as we all know, wasting food feeds climate change, and this has been the subject of Food Waste Action Week. And if you haven't done already, please do get involved on social media with the hashtag Food Waste Action Week. There's a superb amount of materials out there for you to be able to use. So just a little bit of housekeeping as we go into the day. So first of all, please raise any questions you have using the chat function, and we will monitor this throughout the session, and there will be a Q&A session at the end with all of the speakers. The event will be recorded and will be shared afterwards. And we'll also answer any questions that we had and we weren't able to get round to as well subsequently. So the agenda for the day is as follows. First of all, a little bit of background, which I've just gone through, and then I'm going to introduce the excellent speakers we've had. Today's session has a clear theme to hear about the value of data and measurement to help us all reduce food waste, to save money and the planet. At its heart is the approach of target, measure, act, acting on the data and making as bigger an impact as possible. Our first speaker will be Mark Zorns from Winnow, who will have insights from the kitchens across the world and what happens to wasted food when they reopen. Jamie Crummy from Too Good To Go will be highlighting how to be agile with surplus food. Eleanor Morris from Guardians of Grub will talk about the free tools available to set a target, measure, act approach within your business. And then we're delighted we'll have a keynote speaker, Kate Nichols, CEO of the UK Hospitality, who will share her perspectives on the sustainability priorities for the hospitality and food service sector and how utilizing simple tools can really help protect profits and the planet. Then Julianne Kellyat-Noble from the Sustainable Restaurants Association will host a business panel featuring Costa Coffee, the restaurant group Amadeus, and Oxo Tower Restaurant Bar and Brasserie. And Julianne will invite the speakers to describe the work they're undertaking and planning, followed by a Q&A where you can ask panelists questions. Excellent. And on this day, right in the middle of Food Waste Awareness Week, there is also some interesting new research about to be published. And that new research has been published by UNEP. It's called the Food Waste Index Report, which RAP had the pleasure of collaborating on. And I just wanted to highlight to you, because this will be published at 3:30 today, at the end of this webinar. And it has some excellent new data on the scale of food waste right across the planet, and a new estimate of the food waste in homes, in retail, and also in hospitality and food service. So do check it out if you have the opportunity at the end of the seminar. Before I introduce the next speaker, I'd like to share a poll with you. And we'll have another poll at the end of the session, so please do complete both. You should see the poll on your screen now, and you'll have 30 seconds to select your response, and then we will see the results in the few sections after that. So please answer the poll now. So the three questions: is food waste in the top 3 priorities for your organization? Do you know how much food waste you have in your organization? And do you think food waste will increase on reopening? And don't forget to press the submit bar. And so as the excitement builds, we shall shortly see the results for the whole of the the 232 of you that are currently in the webinar. Excellent. And that's interesting. 75% of you think that food waste is in the top 3 strategic priorities for your organization. That's really good to hear. Do you know how much food waste you have in your organization? This is fundamental to our webinar today. And around over half of you think you don't know, and just under half think you do know, which is really interesting. And do you think food waste will increase on reopening? The majority of you think that it will. So that's really an important finding. And so central to this. So hopefully those of you who aren't measuring food waste at the moment will be persuaded by this webinar today that Target, Measure, Act is for your organizations. And those of you who already do measure may find new ways of doing it and more effectively. Excellent. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the first speaker, which is Mark Zorns, CEO of Winnow. And Mark is going to give insights from kitchens from around the world and the impact of reopening. Over to you, Mark.
Thanks, Richard. Very nice to have you all here today. Thank you all for joining. As Richard said, I'm Mark. I am the CEO and one of the founders of Winnow. What I'm going to talk to you all today about is some insight that we've had around the world of businesses that have started to open up from a sort of post-pandemic world and actually what food waste has looked like for them. What are some of the takeaways from that and what it means for you all? And then talk to you a little bit about how people use our technology to actually solve that. So I'm just going to go ahead and go to the next page here. So just to start with an introduction of Winnow, we are a technology company that helps businesses around the world measure and prevent food waste. Today, our clients are saving over $42 million a year in food from being wasted. That's over 36 million meals every year that's no longer being wasted by clients using Winnow. We are based in London, but we have offices in Dubai, Singapore, Shanghai, Romania, and in Chicago. We're used by a number of brands around the world. One of our flagship clients, IKEA, is now in the process of rolling us out globally, but we also work with a bunch of hotel groups, contract caterers, and the like. And really what kind of perspective that gives us is we work with a lot of different operations. And through our global presence, we've been able to see how the markets that are starting to reopen are actually responding from a food waste perspective, which we're going to share with you all today. So the first thing that we found is that we have found, looking at a study of a pretty good set of locations that have opened up post-pandemic or post-lockdown, and we have found that their waste levels, which we measure as a waste as a percentage of sales, increased by 50% compared to their pre-lockdown periods. Pretty substantial increase, big impact on food costs. The things that are driving that really are a few things. You know, as we sort of go into this partial reopening phase, what we're seeing is, first of all, a lot of demand uncertainty. How many people are going to be walking in the door? You know, how many people are going to be actually in a catering environment actually taking up, you know, the sort of on-site food provision relative to, say, bringing their own food or otherwise, as well as less experienced staff that know how to deal with these issues. So it's this volatility, these challenges that they're facing that we really see that are behind this. And the second piece that we found, and this is actually looking at clients that we started with post-pandemic on average versus clients that we started with pre-pandemic. And this is actually taking data from a couple of clients where we have a large number of operations that we both were working with them pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. And what we found is that actually those that are using measurement tools seem to be wasting a lot more post-pandemic. It's sort of tied to that first bit, but it just underlines the importance of, as you start opening up, if you were not measuring food waste before, getting serious about measuring food waste, because what's really surprising is that number can be as high as 3 to 4% of food sales that is actually being thrown away, or 3 to 4% of margin that's actually being wasted relative to food waste for a lot of those drivers that are around that. And if we look at where that's coming from, we think of food waste in kitchens in kind of 4 big buckets. You've got overproduction, which is the fact that there was too much made. That can be in a pre-prepared offer where there's food that was prepared but not sold, but it can also be sort of a mise en place. You've got plate waste, which is what was taken onto plates and what was not eaten. You've got the sort of prep waste, that is sort of in the kitchen, stuff that actually could be better utilized from a yield perspective, but it's not. And then, of course, you've got spoilage. What we're really seeing increase is the overproduction and the spoilage. Of the factors we talked about before, as well as kind of new supply chains are really behind that. So what can you do about actually preventing food waste? Well, the first thing is, of course, measuring it on a daily basis. Really looking at your supply chain, increasing that supply frequency. Your supply chain is likely going to be changing as you open back up if you're not already on top of that, and making sure that you're really closely watching these new suppliers, making sure you've got the right products coming in at the right quality. When you've got that level of uncertainty, simpler menus help you to actually respond to that. Plans for reworking product where you can, and frankly, just as you're opening up, having an open conversation with your customers about this as you're working through these issues. The technology that we use to help customers actually deal with this issue, sort of our flagship product, is a technology called Winnow Vision. It's an AI-enabled technology that helps customers basically when they throw food away. We actually look down using a camera at identifying what's being wasted. We then run that through an artificial intelligence algorithm to identify what's being thrown away. And this has been a really powerful tool, particularly for the larger operators, on understanding how much is being wasted in their kitchen and really tracking it in sort of an accurate and a complete way from that. What we then do with those pictures has been pretty powerful too. So this is actually an operator in Asia, actually a casino in Macau. And I think if any of us saw the food that's actually going in the bin on the right-hand side there being wasted in our kitchens, we would be appalled by it. But what you have is you have a combination of poor product from suppliers that you can clearly see happening in the asparagus on the top. You've got opportunities sort of in the kailan and the white radish where they're only using part of the product and actually utilizing that product in other recipes as a significant opportunity from that. And also potentially the opportunity to think about what they're buying in pre-cut versus what they buy in fresh. Absolutely, that fresh product has a real value and sort of flavor taste to it. But at the same time, if you're not utilizing that full product, an opportunity to really say kind of, is there a better way to purchase that? And our technology help us have that. Beyond that, what we have here is we have a really broad suite of analytics that we provide for the kitchen sort of as they reopen, both sort of an online dashboard paired with the kind of sites that we have that help people understand those trends and be able to drive that down and get that higher waste level that they see in reopening under control. We recognize that every kitchen is not the same. And what we have really done over the pandemic is worked on a suite of technologies, starting with kind of our most simple solution that we call Track, which is really just a tablet to be able to go in and sort of track food waste in a simple and intuitive way that's really good for cafes, for smaller operations, and otherwise. Going into our Waste Monitor product, which is a cost-effective solution, but actually has that sort of ease of getting accurate weights, all the way up to our Vision technology, which is the AI technology, kind of the smart bin helping you capture exactly what's being wasted, fit for purpose for some of the larger operations where you have 10, 20, 30 people in a kitchen and you really need to get that process right. But that said, the thing that I want to leave everybody with is that waste is an opportunity. And actually getting in control of this, measuring it in any way that you can, is something that I would absolutely put as a top priority for anyone reopening, because it's going to be a key part of your cost control as well as minimizing your environmental impact.
Absolutely right, Mark. Thank you very much for that. The key point there is measurement, because measurement gives you the basis on which to act and save money as well as saving the planet. Thank you very much indeed for that. Excellent presentation. And it's now my pleasure to welcome Jamie Crummy, co-founder of Too Good To Go. He's going to talk us about how to be agile and reactive with surplus food to feed people, not bins, and to get involved with redistributing surplus food safely, and give us some clear examples of how that can happen. Jamie, over to you.
Thank you very much, Richard. Let's hope that I can control this keyboard. Yes, so I am Jamie Crummy, one of the co-founders of Too Good To Go, a social impact company, which is all around fighting food waste. And today, as Richard said, I'm going to be talking very much around redistribution surplus. So what many of us will probably know already is 1/3 of all food produced ends up getting wasted. And that's over 9.5 billion tons alone just in the UK. Meaning that by the end of this sort of 90-minute event that we have today, over 1,600 tons of food will be wasted in the UK alone, the equivalent weight to 1,000 cars. So it really is quite shocking. But if there is one theme, one sentiment that I can leave with you today, and I hope will resonate beyond just this talk, it is that reducing food waste is the most immediate, most impactful, and simple action that we as individuals, as leaders, but importantly in the context of today, as businesses, that we can do against climate change. So a bit about ourselves at Too Good To Go. We are the world's largest marketplace against food waste. We operate in 15 countries globally, and in under 5 years have rescued over 60 million meals from going to waste. Now, our app, our platform is incredibly simple, and that's one of the inherent themes of ourselves. It is keeping things simple. So our customers simply log on to the Too Good To Go platform. They'll see a host of participating food businesses, purchase what we refer to as a magic bag, and then collect that from the food business at an allotted collection window. Now, this is what we like to refer to as a win-win situation, a triple win, more like. And what I mean by that is, it's a win for the businesses as they are able to recover those sunk costs. You're able to attract new customers through the platform. But as well, it's a win for the individual, for that customer themselves. They're able to discover new food, new brands, and pay for it at prices that don't cost the earth. But ultimately, it's a win for the planet, because all of this food would otherwise have gone to waste. So as I say, it is this win-win. But what I wanted to talk to you guys about today was essentially that sustainability can stay on the menu when it comes to reopening. And the rationale here is that fighting food waste really doesn't cost the earth. Now, throughout these lockdowns, it's been important for us to respond quickly. And with this, it is this theme of agility. It's about responding quickly. And on that note, I wanted to talk a bit about the work we've been doing with Greene King. Now, Greene King is a pub partner of ours who we've been working with now for many a year. And we've traditionally been helping them to rescue food from their pub carveries. But in November last year, when the lockdowns were looming, Greene King were actually faced with the awful sort of prospect of having to throw away thousands upon thousands of liters of delicious beer. But, what they did was they responded quickly. They were able to get in touch with ourselves, and between us, we were able to rescue over 40,000 pints from going to waste across over 500 different pubs in the UK in just a matter of days. Now, I hope there aren't going to be any more lockdowns, but this notion of agility will still be there. Whether it is a lockdown or something of another description, this notion of agility remains incredibly important, which is responding to the unexpected as quick as we can, particularly when it comes to fighting food waste. Now, it is that time of the year as well, when it comes to spring cleaning. And I'm not, talking about our cupboards here. It's when we're talking about safeguarding ourselves for these seasonal shifts. And here I wanted to touch on just a bit of the work we've been doing with Carluccio's, which is incredibly topical because we've just started working with them this week. And on Monday, we were able to rescue 188 magic bags of food which would otherwise have gone to waste from 6 of their sites. Now, what I mean by this is it's allowed them to, reopen on their terms and reopen right. so that they can, ensure that any of this leftover produce and products from Christmas can, feed a belly as opposed to a bin. So I guess in summary, what it is that I just want to say is it is this fact that, sustainability can stay on the menu. That we need to be agile and respond quickly, but it's also around spring cleaning so we can reopen, right, and open on your terms. So with that note, thank you very much, guys, and look forward to the questions in the Q&A.
Thank you, Jamie. Excellent. And I guess it's just a superb thing to do to be able to stand up and say, I saved 40,000 pints of beer. I mean, that sort of thing it's just the sort of perfect end to a presentation. So thank you very much indeed. And I think we're all eternally grateful for that particular contribution that Food Too Good to Go made. Excellent. And it's now my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Eleanor Morris from Guardians of Grub, to talk about the practical implementation, how to use the resources available in Guardians of Grub to help you protect your profits and our planet. Over to you, Eleanor.
Thanks, Richard. So welcome everyone. It's fantastic to have so many of you here. And today I'd like to share Guardians of Grub campaign from WRAP. So we developed the campaign to increase awareness of the link that wasting food feeds climate change and costs money. And you've heard about Food Waste Action Week, which is this week, and that's the real crux of Food Waste Action Week as well, making that connection that through reducing food waste, we can protect profits and our planet. So we all have a role to play across the hospitality and food service sector. So the Guardians of Grub campaign is all about bringing the whole team together to do that activity, to target, measure, act together. And we've got tried and tested tools. They're all free for you to use right now and access. And today I'm going to give you a whistle-stop tour, and we'll also hear some insights from our panel later, from our business panel later. So the facts are clear. We've got over 1 million tonnes of food that is thrown away by the sector in the UK every year. And the really staggering fact is that 75% of the food that ends up in the bin could have been eaten. And it's that element that we're focusing in on through the Guardians of Grub campaign and through the prevention and tracking activities. So what we've done is develop really simple tools that have been developed by the sector for the sector. And the first of these is our cost saving calculator. So in 4 clicks of a mouse, you can find out exactly how much food waste is currently costing you, but also if you set yourself a target and you've got a range of targets you can select from, how much that would save you over a year, both in financially, but also in carbon and the equivalent of cars. So moving on with that, cracking with tracking itself, measuring and tracking the food waste. If you don't have the data, you can't measure food waste. It really is as easy as 1, 2, 3. And we know that seeing is believing with food waste. You have a complete blind spot if you don't know how much food is ending up in your bin. So the first step is to get 3 or 4 containers, put some bin labels on them. We've got everything that you need to be able to do that. You weigh those containers and you put the information into the tracking sheet, which you can see in number 2. And then you get your teams to add the data from the tracking sheet into our free Excel-based calculator. So then the teams can see where the hotspots are in the pie chart, and you get to see between week 1 and week 4 how you're improving, what the costs are, and how the savings that you're making. And everything that we've developed through Guardians of Grub also works with Unilever Food Solutions Wise Up on Waste app, which is also freely available. But we also know that developing skills are really critical to make this sort of change happen. So we've got free learning available for you and your teams right now. So you can use this to reopen right, and also make sure that your teams have got the skills for the future to make food waste a thing of the past. So first off, we've got our 15-minute cost saving skills course. Sorry, my mouse has stuck. There we go. This was launched in January. We've had some fantastic feedback. This walks you through the principles of target, measure, act for your business. It signposts you to all of the free Guardians of Grub tools, calculators, action plans, case studies, and campaign packs so that you can use social media and materials to really share that message as well. And for a short time, we've also got the Becoming a Champion pilot course, which is a full behaviour change programme, but you can still complete this learning even if your sites aren't operational, if you're based in the UK. So please, if you are interested in finding out more, email guardiansofrap.org.uk to register for the learning, and we've got until the 12th of March. But if you want to find out more about that learning and the next phase for that, then do register for our Guardians of Grub newsletter as well. What you get through that course are the basics at level 1 to set up, right through to level 5, where you're embedding food waste reduction policies and strategies within your business through standard operating procedures, through KPIs and so on. And we've had some really great feedback from people that have been participating in that course so far. So please do get in touch if you're interested. So in summary, we are all on a mission to stop good food from ending up in the bin, and there has never been a more critical time to protect the profits of the hospitality and food service sectors. So I would urge you, if you haven't started this journey, why not get cracking with tracking and use the tools? If you're already an expert and you're already ahead of the game on this, then please help the sector accelerate the pace of change. Why not consider endorsing the campaign, become an ambassador and share the materials? You know, use the hashtag Guardians of Grub, and we'd love to hear from you. So do get in touch if you're interested in being a case study and so on. And please, we've also got lots of campaign materials for you to be able to share the word really easily. So it's really important that we collectively unite in the fight against food waste and feed people, not bins. Thanks very much.
And thank you very much, Eleanor. That's very kind. And that lovely message at the end there, feed people, not bins, absolutely key, key message that's coming out from this webinar. Key importance of measurement, the key importance of acting, and let's not feed the bins of food. Why should we throw good food away? Perfect. Thank you very much for that. And it's now my pleasure to introduce the keynote speech from Kate Nichols, who is the Chief Executive Officer of UK Hospitality. Kate, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, and I'm delighted to join you here today as part of Food Waste Action Week. Really important issue for us at UK Hospitality, in amongst all of the challenges we're facing this year as a result of COVID and previously Brexit. It's really important that we keep the focus on sustainability, and there's a very strong work stream running throughout hospitality about sustainable tourism, sustainable hospitality as we come out of the COVID crisis and look to build back better. So the key areas that I wanted to just pick up on today is around that broader sustainability work stream that we're doing, the UK Hospitality Roadmap and activity that we're working on about net carbon zero ahead of COP26, and how we can make sure that our hospitality sector is a literal showcase when we host that conference at the end of this year, and the role that food waste and building back greener plays in that rebuilding resilience into the sector as we come out of COVID, but also as part of the carbon net zero overview that we're working on. So I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to talk to you at this session. It is such a crucial week for hospitality businesses, and it's great to see so many of you turning out today after what has been a very busy week with the budget and the roadmap from the Prime Minister. Today just really reflects how important the topic of food waste and sustainability is. So the direction of travel in public and political opinion is really clear. Our customers, our people in our food supply chain, our businesses, the end consumer, the general public, and also the government expect more from businesses and more from government to tackle the climate crisis. And today was also the publication of a Trade and Agriculture Commission report, which I sat on, which is looking at the role of agri-food in our trade policy, and again sets out a clear expectation from our consumers, the feedback we had from the general public, as to how the food supply chain, whether it's imported, exported, homegrown, a high expectation on standards, a high expectation on safety, animal welfare and human health, but as you would also expect, a high importance on climate change and making sure sustainability is at the heart of our food strategy. And this is a year when food is going to be just as important and sustainability, they are going to be completely twinned together, as you've got the publication of Henry Dimbleby's food strategy, the National Food Strategy, the first one since the Second World War. You have the publication of strategic recovery frameworks for the hospitality and tourism sector. And as I say, we move forward to COP26. Never before has there been an expectation from all of the stakeholders within the sector that businesses should be doing more to tackle climate change. At the height of the first wave of the COVID-19 pandemic, a survey found that just under half of the public agreed that the government should still be focusing with the same urgency on climate change as it has on COVID-19. And that was right at the height of the public health crisis at the beginning of last year. A very strong indication of the importance that the issue has assumed, and an importance that despite what we've gone through, we can't afford to take our eye off the ball. It will be how we are judged going forward and how we are judged coming out of this. Public concern over the environment is at a 30-year high. It's nearly doubled over the last decade. And according to Ipsos Mori, 4 out of 5 people across the globe agree that we're headed for disaster if we don't act fast. And 7 in 10 agree that if their government does not act now to combat climate change, it will be failing them. So this is where we are going to have to see a really clear global strategy, not just a national strategy or a business strategy, but equally you can see how the incremental change at all of those levels will deal with a big global crisis. Perhaps most importantly for the sector, consumer survey data points to the fact that people now expect businesses to do their bit. Even small businesses, they are expecting to do their bit in tackling climate change, and they will be willing to penalise those that don't, both in terms of removing custom from those that don't have an environmental friendly or sustainability policy or a carbon neutral policy, but also in terms of actual boycotts, but also proactively influencing the shape of their purchasing decisions. At a government level, the Prime Minister's reaffirmed the commitment to green priorities during his speech to the Conservative conference last year. And I think it's also a clear sign when you've got the Energy Minister, who was looking after green initiatives and carbon net zero, now promoted to the Business Secretary. You can see that the forceful nature of that 10-point plan to tackle climate change being at the heart of the government's policy agenda going forward. The Prime Minister also affirmed after the COVID crisis, when he held the first Business Council, that there was a real intention to build back greener after COVID-19. Clear indications and expectation for different sectors to get their house in order and to look at carbon emissions, as well as a broader range of sustainability challenges. The government has built on this commitment with a number of key policy documents, most notably the 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution, a direction of how the UK will be looking to decarbonise at a global level. And with the UK set to host the COP26 conference in November, the largest conference ever to be hosted in the UK, climate change will be at the forefront of government's minds in the years to come and the defining business issue of the age. Now, clearly, hospitality was hit first, hit hardest by the pandemic, with scars likely to be with the sector for some time to come. And clearly there is a perception issue that our sector has to address, both in the general public's mind and in government's mind, of being an industry that is dynamic, innovative, front of foot, looking to future growth and future opportunities, not one that is dying on its feet, or that one that you don't want to join as a career. So it's important for us to seize the opportunities that the government's agenda on carbon neutral and carbon net zero gives us, to be able to demonstrate how we can be a force for change, how we can be a force for good in society, and how sustainability will be playing out for all businesses as they move forward, positioning hospitality as a leader in the UK's carbon reduction plans. In terms of tackling hospitality emissions, food waste reduction will be a core part of our sector's journey towards decarbonisation. It's an area where we've seen specific and particular focus and progress over the last few years, with our partnership with WRAP setting out a route map for all parts of the sector to tackle food waste. And as we come out of COVID, when there's an ever greater focus on margins, pricing and costs, this is a great way of getting a foot in the door in being able to tackle food waste and starting that journey for carbon net zero. As we've already heard, just over 1 billion tonnes of food waste are generated globally each year. If global food waste was a country, it would be the 3rd largest country in terms of carbon emissions. And in the UK, 1.1 million tonnes of food is wasted by the food industry every year in the UK, 75% of which is said to be avoidable. Now, this waste comes from a variety of sources, about 1/3 of it from consumers, 20% from spoilage, and the remainder in preparation. So there's a lot that we can do in tackling portion size, in tackling the way in which we prepare food, but also looking at how we reuse food in the kitchens. And the environmental argument for food waste reduction is clear, but as we're moving towards reopening and looking at recovery, then we can look at short-term financial savings, reducing food waste to protect the planet, protect profits, and also to tackle some of the upcoming issues that the government is looking towards in terms of the obesity strategy, where they are looking at more portion control and portion management. It's one of the times that we can take as an opportunity to get on the front foot with the government on all of those areas. Even with the assistance announced yesterday in the budget, hospitality businesses are in great peril as a year of reduced trade, restrictions and suboptimal trading. There is going to be a further period, probably 6 to 9 months of recovery, where footfall will be low, trade will be uncertain. Food waste could therefore be higher on the agenda because we are looking at times when we won't be able to exactly plan who's coming in, who's not, as we settle down into the new ways of working, and particularly the move towards office return being slow and uncertain and patchy in parts. So taking very simple steps to reduce business waste, especially as something as avoidable as food waste, can help businesses improve profit margins and help to build back greater resilience as we come out of the recovery period. So we're really pleased to be supporting WRAP. Both the BHA and the ALMR, who predate UK hospitality, which was created in 2018, were supporters of WRAP and worked collectively and collaboratively to be able to put in place those blueprints. The Guardians of Grub campaign is a great initiative to get behind, and we've cascaded out freely available resources to each of our members. And I think it's important also that we reach out to the broader industry, because you have members within trade associations, but you have a broader number of independent businesses, cafes, restaurants, coffee shops, pubs and bars. So we're cascading it out more generally, because I think, again, working on the Dave Brailsford Sky Cycling position of incremental change, a large number of very small adjustments can build up to a very big contribution by the hospitality sector to tackling food waste, but also broader sustainability goals. So we recommend that ahead of opening, all sector businesses take a look at all of these resources, do a food waste audit, take steps to reduce possible wastage, and make sure that the teams are trained in that as we come forward. The tools provide a very rough guide on substantial savings and therefore reducing waste and costs. There are already so many great initiatives across the sector to tackle this issue, and I'm certain that we'll continue to take great strides. And one of the things we'll be doing at UK Hospitality is providing a showcase of those good practice examples, giving people peer-to-peer opportunities to identify case studies where we've got examples of good practice that can be picked up. So to name just a few examples, Nando's have over 300 charity partners that they give unused food to each night. During the pandemic, as a result of closures, initiatives like Feeding the Nation project, being led by John Vincent, founder of Leon, helped to divert food originally destined for the out-of-home market direct to the public, key workers and the needy. And many of our smaller businesses in communities throughout the country were changing their supply chains to be able to provide a route to market for food that would otherwise go to waste from the wholesale sector, and also reaching out to feed their communities and to feed children in particular in their communities. And a lot of them have signalled that they will continue to do that, diverting food waste from their businesses to nutritious and good quality food going out to the broader community. So if we look ahead to the future, hospitality has almost weathered the storm of COVID, stands ready to build back greener and to meet the challenge of climate change so that we can be on the front foot, be seen as a key partner to government, a key sector that it needs to continue to support and work with, and also one that is, as I say, dynamic, innovative and forward thinking. We're the leading industry alongside Zero Carbon Forum to generate an industry-wide collaboration on definition and measurement of carbon and on action to reduce carbon emissions. And we'll be launching a sector roadmap to net zero this summer, which will commit to reaching net zero 10 years ahead of the government's planned date, so that we will be front of foot and in line with the retail sector in reaching net zero ahead of target. This will be a world-leading piece of work in the decarbonisation of hospitality businesses, and food waste and tackling food waste will be at the heart of that. And we'll be showcasing the roadmap and all the progress the sector has made at COP26 with world leaders, business leaders, and with the ministers, showcasing many of the initiatives underway within the industry. So we look forward to coming back at the next Food Waste Week and celebrating the successes and the progress the sector is making with you. The value of collaboration for the hospitality sector has been demonstrated throughout the COVID pandemic. With a united voice through UK Hospitality, we've managed to achieve more influence and sway over government policy, and we look forward to working with all partners to help the sector on its journey towards net zero carbon emissions and tackling food waste. Thank you once again for your time, and thank you for your participation in the webinar.
And thank you, Kate. Thank you very much indeed for taking time out of your busy day to talk to us today. And thank you very much for that rousing end, that focus on food waste reduction, that link to climate change, wasting food feeds climate change, and that real resonance on collaboration and the importance of collaboration to drive change. We really appreciate that. And thank you very much indeed for those excellent insights. And good luck at COP26. I mean, getting this onto the agenda, I think, is really, really important going forwad. So excellent stuff. Thank you. So it's now my pleasure to introduce the panel session. And Juliette Caillouette-Noble will actually introduce all the speakers and take us through. It's over to you, Julianne.
Hello. Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm Julianne Caillouette-Noble. I am the Managing Director here at the Sustainable Restaurant Association. And as most of you know, we are a not-for-profit membership organization working specifically with the hospitality industry on sustainability initiatives. We view sustainability as kind of a big, all-encompassing activation that covers kind of plate, planet, and people. And food waste has been a core element of the SRA framework since our founding 10 years ago. It is my pleasure to be hosting this session this afternoon and to be inviting speakers from businesses to join me. So we have on our panel Nick Jarman, who's the General Manager of Oxo Tower Restaurant, Bar and Brasserie, Oliver Rosevier, who is Head of Environment at Costa, James Taylor, who is Head of Overhead Purchasing and Group Energy and Environmental Manager at the Restaurant Group, and Mark Frankel, who's the Director of Food and Beverage for Amadeus. So I am pleased to have you guys joining me this afternoon. And we'll go ahead and get started. Just making sure we can see the other panelists. As Kate was mentioning earlier, the pandemic has obviously provided a whole different context to this conversation this afternoon. And hospitality has been facing a complexity of issues over the past year. As a starting point for each of you guys on the panel, I'm interested to hear whether you would say that this current circumstances has increased your commitment to things like sustainability and food waste reduction, or kept that about the same, or pushed it lower on the priority list. Perhaps we could start with you, Nick.
I think it's very much pushed it up the priority list in terms of what we need to focus on, given the level of uncertainty around trade and what's happening within the marketplace.
Others feel free to please jump in.
Okay. I mean, from our perspective, I think it's high, and I think it stays high in terms of priority. You know, we understand what our customers want and what they demand when they visit any of our exhibitions. So we're based up at the NEC in Birmingham. So we get quite a high footfall from sort of the general public. We get a lot of feedback in terms of, you know, what are you doing? Could you do more? And I think we're on that curve. And as someone said before, you know, I think the focus on making sure that we come out of this bigger, better, and stronger is key. So, you know, whether that be sustainability, you know, and as we said, if we're feeding people and not bins, you know, the cash registers will continue to ring as well, which clearly is important.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I guess also from a Costa point of view, I definitely think it's risen further up the agenda. Certainly when we went into the full lockdown in March, a lot of our stores were shut and we had to redistribute a lot of stock within a 48-hour period. But I think that really raised awareness for a lot of our team members who, yeah, we already had the controls in place for you to redistribute, but I think it really raised up the agenda for our team members as well. So we've certainly seen a greater level of engagement from a team member point of view, and that's really helped us to drive forward some of the activities like our rollout of Too Good To Go across nationwide in January. So I think it really has shown how important it is to our business going forward.
Yeah, and I think from our point of view, it's a common theme. It definitely has increased. I'll not steal my own thunder because I'm sure we'll go into more detail, but we'll definitely see a switch from kind of segregating the food waste and recycling it and moving that up the hierarchy to actually reduce overall.
That's really positive to hear that that the circumstances have raised awareness, and I'm especially interested in that idea that Ollie was mentioning about engaging team members and feeling like more people are invested in what's happening because they've experienced it more directly. So that's really great to hear. Nick, you guys have been using the Guardians of Grub resources this year, and I'm really interested to hear how that has helped your team and what impact that has made, despite the fact that you guys have not been operating business as usual over the past year.
We were part of the original pilot in Food Made Good with the SRA back in 2019. So it was something that we were very much aware of in terms of how we could potentially monitor food waste. Then as obviously lockdown hit, we were seeing food waste happen in so many different ways, where the businesses were having to open and close. We also were doing some community kitchen work with FareShare, where we were seeing the sheer volume of food waste that was coming through, where you get a delivery of 600 kilos of food that was just going to waste the next day, and really seeing how big that sort of problem was. So when we got to October, we sort of started to work with Guardians of Grub and start that initial monitoring process again, using the tools. And we found them really simple for the team to use in terms of getting people aware of how it all works. I suppose one of the troubles though is making sure that it's all about the data, but that your data is correct. So everybody's got to be on board in terms of monitoring it and looking at it in a consistent way, because as soon as you start to interpret the data in a different way, things start to completely get blown out. We make our own stock and things like that. So obviously if you're making your stock and you get a whole lot of bone weight into it, then obviously your waste per cover goes up drastically one week and then drops the next. So getting an understanding of how the data works and then looking at how you can potentially impact on that. When we looked at the first initial 2 weeks of trials with Guardians of Grub, our food waste was per cover half of what it was when we did the initial trial with Food Made Good.
Great.
So I think we'd actually a lot of learnings in relation to the journey that we'd gone through. If you look at a simple cauliflower, can be used in 3 different ways rather than just taking the prime pieces of it and putting the rest in the bin. You can make a cauliflower puree with part of it, with the stalks. You can do something with the leaves. You can do something with the florets. So really the chefs are looking at it in a very different way, each bit of produce that comes in. And I think part of that has been driven by the lockdown and the scarcity of food that people have seen. People look at it in a different way.
That's really great, and it's great to hear how you're driving that trajectory forward, and that these measurements are, as you say, the data is only so valuable as the interpretation of it and how you're engaging with it to drive change. So on that sort of note, Ollie, when it comes to Costa, can you tell us a little bit about the idea of kind of target setting around food waste and how you've managed to keep momentum up to kind of achieve targets despite the challenging circumstances and climate this year?
For sure. So, I guess you start off with, we've already got a commitment there to through the Step Up to the Plate pledge to reduce our food waste by 50% by 2030, and that's kind of really helped us to focus the business on this area. I think in terms of how we approach our targets, we very much kind of take that concept of the food waste hierarchy. So really working first in the initial stages in terms of that kind of reducing food waste in the first place. And to be honest, that's been quite challenging over the last year because of the variation in the types of trade. We've had, full sit-in, we've had takeaway only, we've had drive-through only, and again, it's been quite difficult to manage those stock levels. But actually, by having good controls in place, it's allowed our supply chain team to really flex in terms of the product that we have on the shelf to make sure there is availability, but we're not seeing food waste at the end of the day. It then goes into some of the areas around selling it on. So things like the Too Good To Go app, which said we've now, I think, redistributed over 100,000 bags through that app across our estate, which is great. And it's been really positive from a business point of view, because obviously we're not losing revenues there, as well as obviously doing the right thing for the environment, which has been really positive to kind of keep sales going forward this year. Then we kind of go down to the give it away piece. So we work very closely with people like Olio and also Hubbub's Community Fridge, where we're making sure that we're redistributing that food waste appropriately rather than having to go into the bin. But then in the final stages, when we're looking at recycling, it is very much about making sure it's going through food recycling. So companies like Biogen, who we send all our food waste to, or Biobean, who send all our coffee grounds to make sure that at least we're doing the most positive thing we can with any food that might be left over. But also, I think one of the other areas we've really focused on is actually how we work with our suppliers as well. So certainly at a distribution level, a distribution centre level, we work with FareShare quite closely to redistribute any overstocks or any damaged stock we might have at a distribution level, but also encouraging our suppliers to engage with charities like FareShare to redistribute any food waste that they may have through kind of overstocks or not in standard products as well. So I think by taking that approach to a waste hierarchy, that's really helped us to focus the business to drive that whole piece forward.
Brilliant. Yeah, great. James, I'm interested, now we've heard kind of throughout today that people are expecting that food waste will rise post-lockdown, and Mark has shown that that has indeed been the case around the world as we've seen lockdowns lift. At the SRA, we've heard lots of anecdotal evidence from the first lockdown around increased levels across businesses, just because demand was difficult to predict and bookings became really unreliable. I wonder, as we look forward to this large scale opening happening in the late spring, early summer, what role food waste mitigation is playing in your kind of plans for reopening, and how you're managing that within the different brands within the restaurant group.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, first of all, obviously, we're definitely looking forward to getting reopened again for dining outside in April. It's difficult, not just because of multiple brands, but multiple regions and I guess, parameters to work in within Scotland, Wales, England, dine outside, dine in as well eventually. So that's all good. And the headwinds are not just from that volatility in demand and possibility of further restrictions that we've got to keep an eye on, but also, menu changes in those brands as well is kind of, outside of the pandemic, one of the main risks for food waste. I guess first and foremost, and I think people have touched on this, it's flexible and accurate forecasting is really key. So what we've done is we've built, I guess, much stronger links between, even to daily links between our operators and supply chain on their forecasts for sales, and how that kind of falls out across the menu mix itself. That's really key to not over order, but as Ollie said, make sure we have got availability as well. Luckily, all things being equal, we've got really busy restaurants. These restaurants are receiving multiple deliveries per week, 3 to 5 sometimes. So actually the risk of depth of day within any location is never too high itself, because we're constantly replenishing. But equally, we've taken learnings from the last lockdown. So we've got new initiatives in place, like working with food banks at a depot level, working with the Too Good To Go guys, at a location level. We redistributed over 15,000 cases from depot last year to food banks, and just even in the first 2 months in a small trial of Too Good To Go, we were able to redistribute 1,600 kilograms of food, and that will have gone up because that was a figure only up to January. So Too Good To Go will be, and has already expanded to more brands in our leisure division, and also we've got some really good data from working with the SRA on the ratio between plate scrape and food prep, and that's something that we can now be in a position to act upon, I think.
Brilliant. Great. Mark, over to you guys. Obviously, you're in a bit of a different climate, working at event kind of catering in that large scale venue. I'm interested to hear, as restrictions are easing and the kind of your sector is starting to come back to life, how does food waste feature into that strategy? And do you see the expectations of customers changing as events start to return? And how does that influence the way that you message your strategy to those customers?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, we're all about mass gatherings. So, you know, for those that don't know, we're obviously not a high street brand or name. So, as I mentioned, we operate up in Birmingham, the NEC. We also have a couple of arenas as well in the city centre in Birmingham, as well as the ICC. So, yeah, I mean, you know, how did it affect us? I mean, we closed, say from as everybody else did. We had a small blip of opening. We have a couple of sort of visitor attractions, being Cadbury World and Dudley Zoo. So yeah, that was tough, you know. So yeah, we had to reopen quite quickly. We limited the menu, and we tried to do as much as we possibly could. But inevitably there was waste, as you know, we went back down into lockdown. But so we worked with the guys at Winnow. And we've seen some fantastic results, particularly in the city centre. We're rolling that out at the moment in terms of additional smart bins across our estate. We also work with Olio as well. So, you know, we have those local food heroes and volunteers that come and collect those foods from us that is surplus. So we're doing as much as we possibly can. I think the thing that helped us in terms of sort of the pandemic was those two venues that I just mentioned. You had to pre-book, whereas before it was just walk up. So we had a good idea of numbers before the day, which is unusual for us. So that did help sort of limit that food waste. The client comms is obviously important. So, you know, they understand about social distancing clearly. They understand the measures that we're putting in place. They're not surprised when they reach our venue. So I think we weren't disappointing anybody. So that was, I think, a big positive. You know, we're working with those guys now to reopen sort of in April and May, and say hopefully, as you say, towards the end of June, July, August, September. You know, probably the arenas, I think, will probably reopen in September, I guess, for those big acts. But you know, what do people look like? Or what do they want going forward? And that's, I think, the big question. You know, I think, you know, we all do these things now, and you know, Zoom is interesting, and you know, it's we're probably all a little bit frustrated, looking forward to sort of getting back and seeing colleagues and shaking each other's hand and sort of meeting up for a coffee. So you know, I think that will be important when we do come back to life. I think sustainability is obviously there right front and centre. So you know, when we come out of this pandemic, I wonder what packaging is going to look like, you know, for the contract catering people such as ourselves. Will the great British public expect everything to be wrapped and additional packaging? And I hope not, but you know, that could be something that we may well be forced to do. That obviously will have a knock-on effect to labelling with the Natasha's Law thing that's coming in from the 1st of October. So there's an awful lot of work from us internally to kind of try and second guess that and kind of work through. I do feel people want more artisan and kind of get back to the normal. You know, we work with 80% of everything we buy is from within a 30-mile radius of our kitchen. So I think we'll want to continue to do that and showcase that local produce. I think value for money, I think probably everyone's picked on that. It will be essential. So we can't just hike prices. So, you know, we need to continue to sort of offer great value. And innovation, all the stuff that we've seen already, AI is going to play a huge important part, both in terms of demand forecasting and also obviously to reduce waste and save obviously the environment and reduce carbon, but also sort of manage and maintain margins, as I say. So yeah, more sustainability I think is important. So all of that innovation on food, etc. But you know, when all said and done, I think when Kasabian are playing at the Utilita Arena, you know, that first event, I think we'll sell a lot of burgers, a lot of fish and chips, and a shed load of beer.
Yeah, I expect that people will be very excited to have a drink together once it's finally safe to do so. I think there's been some really interesting themes that you guys have all pointed to, which is the buy-in across your teams and the ways that you guys have managed to use this opportunity to kind of get buy-in across multiple people, as well as the partnerships. All of you guys have emphasized varying levels of partnerships and external bodies such as Winnow, Too Good To Go, Olio, community fridges, other opportunities and partnerships, fair share, things that can really help, and how it's something that isn't able to be done alone. So I think that's been really interesting. We've got a couple more minutes before we rejoin and open up for a Q&A. So I guess on that note, starting with you, kind of Ollie, I guess what would be your key advice in terms of engaging your team, and especially with so much of your teams on furlough potentially, or new staff to be hired as the industry reopens? What's your kind of top tip on engaging people in this journey and making sure that everybody feels bought in?
Yeah, I think the key thing for us is really engaging with teams, both from how they work in business, but also how they work at home. So during the Food Waste Action Week, we've been putting out a lot of messaging to our store teams around actually how they can have an effect in the home as much as it is in the office, in stores. So that's really helped. So an engagement from our point of view, and actually just things like when we launched Too Good To Go across nationwide in January, we had a training course online, and it's really warming to know that actually we've got 16,000 people working for us, and 13,000 of those actually engaged with that training, which is phenomenal. So to have that level of engagement on training is fantastic. So I think it's really maximizing, using this kind of crest of a wave, I suppose, in terms of awareness to really sort of push forward those messages about food waste and actually what impact you can have, and also linking back to the climate change pieces people have touched on already. This is the year of climate change action, and I think this is a key opportunity to really raise how important food waste is in that whole conversation, how we can try and drive that whole piece forward.
Brilliant. Does anybody else have a tip that they want to throw in on how they're engaging their teams?
I think just make it relevant. I think some of the slides we saw already was ton equals cars, because what does a ton of carbon look like? So we've just transferred that into laps of the ring road around Birmingham. Chefs understand it, they get it, and they can play their part.
Absolutely. Nick, do you have a tip on your team?
Yeah, I think it's got to become part of the culture of what you do. It's not an option. It's something that we do as an organization. It's something we need to do as a community, and it's something we need to do for the planet. Yeah. There's no option around this. So it really is getting everybody involved and also showing them that they have a responsibility around it as well.
Brilliant. And I think, Richard, are you there to join us? I think to touch in with
yes,
final
Julianne.
Brilliant. Final question.
And I've got one question actually just for the panel, which was an excellent session. Thank you, Julianne, for facilitating that. That was just great. And I'm just going to ask each one of you just for one quick question. I'm looking for a sort of 30-second answer if I can, but it's I'm going to let I'm going to start with Nick and just say, and I'm going to ask the same question to all of you. Learning from the experience of the first lockdown, what would you do differently going forward? And starting with you, Nick, what would you do differently going forward as a result of the first lockdown?
I suppose not buy into the drama of everything that you hear. You've just got to look at what's going on a day-to-day basis and respond every day. There's no future planning for it. A lot of the things that we heard that were going to change didn't happen. So it's really looking at what happens tomorrow.
Yeah, that's perfect. Exactly right. And if I might move to Ollie, and then I'm going to go to Mark. So Ollie next.
I think for us is really kind of having that real focus on your supply chain and exactly how you manage that food waste right in the start. So actually kind of getting that reduction down. So, I think we've really tightened up following lockdown in that whole process, and that's really helped us to make sure that we don't have food waste in the first place.
Yeah, I think that's key. If we can build that in going forward, Ollie, we can make a really big difference as a result of that. Excellent. And now over to Mark, and then I'm going to go on to James.
Yeah, I'd echo what Ollie's just said. If I'm honest, it is about that supply management relationship. It's that open and honest sort of dialogue, making sure they absolutely understand the position you're in, and vice versa. And say we've really been able to help each other, and those relationships they'll just last.
Yeah, Excellent. And last but not least, James.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I'd say keep talking, be ready for anything. Talk between operators and supply chain. Keep talking, be open, transparent with your suppliers. They will support you, and act fast and consistently.
Yeah, I think that's excellent advice. That open dialogue, certainly in other parts of the food supply chain, we found that's been absolutely critical to reducing food waste and actually keeping tabs on what's happening within the food system, particularly when things are changing so quickly. So yeah, excellent advice. Well, thank you very much. And thank you again, Julianne, for doing that. So I'm now going to do a Q&A session based on the questions that you've posed. So I'm going to keep all the panel that you've just heard, and I'm going to bring a couple of new people back in. So Jamie, if you could join us as well, and Mark from Winnow. And also it's my pleasure to introduce Richard Clifford from UK Hospitality as well. Coming in. Welcome, Richard. Thank you for joining us. So we've got a range of questions which I wanted just to pose, and one of the ones I wanted to start with actually, and this is I'm going to start with you, Julianne, and then I'll come to you, Richard, as well, which is, how can we help micro and small hospitality business open better? Maybe you two could start that off. Starting with you, Julianne.
Brilliant. So I think this is really important because the collaboration across the whole sector and not leaving anybody out really matters. So what we try to do at the SRA is cascade the knowledge and the things that larger businesses potentially have the ability to invest in, to cascade those learnings down to smaller businesses. So I think we all have a role, whether that's as those of us working within the industry, to nudge each other along, to share our learnings, to ensure that sustainability information is not competitive information, it's pre-competitive, it's for the sake of the industry. And then those of us as diners and as customers have an ability to influence the places that we love to work. So having conversations with restaurants, asking questions, digging in, encouraging, if you show restaurants that you're interested in a subject as a customer, or that you care where the food in the bin goes, it surely makes a difference, because restaurants more than ever are dying for that relationship with customers and to see what matters to them to ensure that they get their loyalty. So I think we all have a role to play to ensure that we get this message out broad across the industry, and that it's not isolated to just those that have the money to spend on solutions.
Yeah, I think that's a critical point, getting it widely across the whole sector. So we're seeing a system-wide change towards inherently lower food waste operations. That's great. Richard, have you got anything to add to that? What's your
Yeah, no, thanks, Richard, and thanks everyone for inviting me on here. It's a really interesting challenge, and it's interesting to see the government has really noticed that the SME community is one that needs to be involved within progress towards reaching net zero carbon, and also in terms of cutting carbon emissions. So getting this information out to smaller businesses is really important, and it's something that we've been looking to do through our membership. And I would also, and Kate obviously alluded to it earlier, point to everyone as well to sort of the freely available resources as well, such as the Guardians of Grub campaign and the resources that they have available. These are sort of accessible resources that can be used by SME businesses, that can be used by businesses of all kinds to take a look at food waste and take a look at the waste that's coming from their business and try and tackle this problem. And I think it's just kind of making people aware of the resources that are available for them, and also the easily available steps that they can actually take to start reducing waste. There are sort of quite clear and easily sort of signposted steps that you can do to make quite a big difference in terms of your profits and in terms of reduction of carbon emissions. So Julianne touched on it. It's just kind of distilling this information and making sure that as we move towards decarbonisation as a sector, we continue to sort of move there with the SME community as well. I mean, hospitality is predominantly SME based, so it's going to be a key part of any sort of sector transition towards net zero and towards a reduction of carbon emissions. So it's just important to really get that message out there and really try to show them that it's possible to do it.
Excellent, exactly. Show them it's possible to do it. I think that's a key point, because sometimes people think this is too difficult to do, and I think just the sort of level of commitment I'm hearing in this webinar today is just excellent to show people what to do. I think that's absolutely central. Good. The next question, I think it'll be for Ollie and Jamie, which is, one of the critical issues seems to be the management of demand. what tools are you using or you think are needed to get a better grasp of demand? Maybe I'll start with Ollie.
So I guess, again, it is very much about that talking with suppliers and working with suppliers to manage supply effectively, and then working across your business, so both supply chain and finance, to manage that whole sort of demand management side of things. It is really challenging because I think we're in kind of unprecedented times in terms of we've never seen this type of operation where we're swinging in between, and that's been quite challenging. But actually, you know, we go back to what we talked about at the very start, which is data is absolutely key. It's about sort of tracking exactly where you think sales are going to sit, and therefore what products you should be placing on the shelf. And then actually effectively managing if you are going to have any waste through, you know, things like the Too Good To Go app to make sure that we're kind of you know, redistributing or selling it on any excess before it has to go to waste, essentially. So I think the key is, you know, use the data, use your insight, and really collaborate across your business to be able to manage that effectively.
Excellent, exactly that. And Jamie, have you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think just to add on to what Ollie said there, and this is a particularly pertinent question when we're talking to the audience today, when we're talking to hospitality and food service. And more important than not, I feel it's with those businesses which have a business model around that grab and go aspect. And you know, we can forecast as much as we want, but the reality is that production needs to be high in order to cover these costs. And you know, I think as much as businesses can do to prepare and forecast, the reality is they need to be prepared for a safety net. And as Ollie sort of alluded to there, it's where, you know, platforms like Too Good To Go can help and assist these organizations to ensure that their production levels are at the level that they need to be, and that they can recover those sunk costs in these times when the bottom line is so key.
Richard, Mark here. Can I just jump in and add something? I think that, look, demand is always a challenge to get a handle on, and not to say that sort of better tools on demand would not add value. I think they absolutely would. But at least one of our observations in a lot of the clients we work with is how much more opportunity they have to react to demand as well. And I would echo what Jamie says, you need to have that safety net, but to get teams out of the mindset of we're going to prepare a certain amount for the entire lunch period, or we're going to prepare a certain amount for the entire breakfast period. And that's hard, honestly, because by human nature, it's easy to stack it all up and kind of let it go. But in those moments, specifically those products where demand is more volatile, focusing in on those and producing throughout the service in sort of tighter batches is a huge lever to reduce food waste. And I know it's sort of a common adage to do it, but I just can't underline enough how focusing on that can be a huge tool for prevention.
Yeah, I totally think, and it's also about, and that's about shifting mindsets as well. And that's a critical part of this, is shifting mindsets. Thank you very much, Mark. That was excellent. So moving on swiftly to further questions, and I'm going to just suggest this one for Nick, and then Mark, I'd also like you to comment on it if you wouldn't mind, which is a note about saying that an organisation is hoping to conduct research in Newcastle, focusing on what aspects and to look at what extent managerial values, skills and behaviours, or the environment in which people operate, influences food waste. And I wonder if I might start with that for you, Nick, and then move on to Mark.
I think people have to believe in the journey. So they've got to believe in the confidence of the management around what's going on, but then there's got to be integrity around it. So we touched on it earlier in relation to, if the data's not clear, then everybody's, well, do I really buy into this? And or it's not my fault, it's somebody else's fault, I'm not part of it. So it's really about having that sort of collective experience together, and that comes through the management in relation to what's going on. The chef buying into it, the restaurant manager buying into it, the kitchen porter buying into it. It's everybody. So you've got to take everybody within your organization down that journey, because if you don't, you've got a weak link.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely key, going right through the organization and clear communication. Mark, in your experience, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Nick. Absolutely, it's that clear direction, but it is from the top, and we've heard it a few times today. Actually, it's setting targets, and then it's blinking measuring them and reporting against them. Because say without measurement, you've got no idea whether you're doing good, whether you're not doing so good. And then sort of one of the things that we did is exactly that sort of that challenge with the chef team, that don't always like to embrace change. We put something into the kitchen that's going to sort of put a spotlight on what they're putting in the bin. But when we've explained to them, about what we're trying to do and talking about reducing of carbon and actually this is not to trip you up, Mr. Chef. It's about helping you achieve your budgets in terms of food costs, but it's also reducing carbon emissions. That's where we got buy-in, but it's from the top, measuring it all the way through.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mark. And if I just ask Mark Zorns just to comment from a measurement side, because I guess the behavioural change and the management attitude is so key to the effectiveness of your systems.
Yeah, look, the organizations that really do embed this not just into we're going to measure food waste because it's part of a program to measure food waste, but the ones that are most successful actually do things like embedding this data into their P&L and how they report, right? The ones that actually make it part of the sort of daily metrics that they use with their teams and put that up. And there's, a role we play in helping to support that, but so much of that is driven by the actual operations themselves and the focus that drives on that. I will just highlight one other thing, which is a little bit of a tangent to the question, but I think is just really important. When we talk about food waste, I just believe it's so important to focus on the problem and not the people. When I've seen this really go wrong is when in a chef environment, somebody throws food away and the immediate reaction is that this individual has done something wrong. And that may solve that very specific problem, but what that does is that creates a culture in the kitchen that if you create an error or if you actually generate waste, it's better for you to actually hide that problem than it is to report it because you're going to try to avoid it. And so creating a culture, what we're doing is we're measuring the issue and we're working together better as a team to be able to drive that waste down and not going into anything around identifying people who've thrown the food away or sort of calling those people out, but actually focus on the issue itself is so fundamental because focusing on an individual and starting to call them out can be the very, very beginning of putting the entire program off the rails if it's done poorly.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent insight, Mark, because I think that's a good way of actually driving a food waste prevention initiative completely off the rails and alienating people. And I do think that, getting everybody's buy-in to that change is so key. And it sort of builds on what Nick and Mark have both said. Mark Frankel has also said. Got time, hopefully, for another 2 questions. So the first of those, I think this one might be for Richard and indeed Julianne, and I also appreciate perhaps input from Ollie as well on this. But do you think the government needs to bring in greater incentives to encourage businesses to reduce their food waste? So do you think government needs to bring in greater incentives? I think I'll start that with Richard and then go to Julianne.
It's an interesting question. I think with regards to food waste as well, there's already been so much movement within the sector towards making steps to reduce food waste anyway. I think it's something that is already well underway in terms of the sector actually taking these positive steps towards actually reducing food waste. It'd be interesting to see what any potential incentives could be if they were to come from government. So it's an interesting point. It's not something that I've heard of, has been in the works, or it's not something that I've heard of from my engagement with government has been something that's potentially in the pipeline necessarily, but very interesting question. But on the broader waste of reducing food, the broader question of reducing food waste anyway, I think it's already the kind of thing that the sector is being taking great strides on and is already, well on its way to addressing.
Indeed. Julianne, what do you think?
I think that more broadly speaking, that the government could and should, particularly on the back of reopening and rebuilding the industry post-COVID, that the government should be thinking more dynamically about how to support restaurants that are making sustainable choices. So I think that we're going, continue to welcome sector support that's been such a life support over the last year and has been so needed. But the thing about campaigns like Eat Out to Help Out is that there was nothing within that government support that was incentivizing restaurants to be doing a better job or to be encouraging a kind of a more responsible approach. So there was a bit of irony in having Eat Out to Help Out launch the same time as the government obesity strategy, and you end up with the government giving incentives to businesses just to sell more quantities of food. And so I do think that there is a way for the government to be more dynamic in rewarding businesses that are taking action. And I think that there is a way for the government to incentivize businesses, especially SMEs, that aren't going to be able to afford some of this technology and things. All of these free resources are brilliant. It's still a time cost and things. So for small businesses to feel that it's worth it, if there's some sort of incentive that they can feel off the back of that time investment that they're putting in, I think you would see that end of the sector rising up faster. So I think that there is opportunity for government to be more dynamic in how it incentivizes sustainable change.
Okay, thank you, Julianne. I'm going to try and squeeze in 2 more questions if I can. I'm going to this one I'm hoping for James. James, we talked about the changing behaviour of customers and how that affects demand. Any advice on how to forecast the take-up of popularity when you've got no history or trends to rely upon?
I'd actually just like to pick up on the previous question very quickly, which is, I think if we know the history of how government have engaged with certain points and look at how energy happened, for example, with the CRC scheme, we'd probably end up with a disincentive and they would just tax food waste. That means that your food waste itself becomes more expensive, and then there's a disincentive to segregate it properly, potentially, because the differential is not there between recycling and the general waste stream. So I personally think, as others have made the point, that we have enough engagement with the teams, with the consumers already, that we're actually doing the right thing on our own without the government kind of getting involved. But that would be my personal opinion. Richard, sorry, I made the actual question.
James, sorry, just if I mind, I completely agree there, which is it should not be around punitive measures, but around encouraging positive behaviours. So yeah, that's just my 2 cents.
Fully agree.
Great, thank you very much indeed. Well, I think that's just about us out of time for this panel session, but thank you very much indeed, all of you, for your contributions. I really appreciate that, and it's worthwhile emphasising that all your questions, we've taken note of all of your questions, and those that weren't answered during the session, we'll make sure are answered to everybody afterwards. So thank you very much, everybody. Very much appreciate the way you've engaged in that. And so I thought what would be good to do now is to do a second poll and see how your response is now after you've heard the webinar. So we now have another 30-second opportunity to a poll. So do you think food waste should be in the top 3 strategic priorities for your organisation upon reopening? You may have seen that one before. How do you plan to measure food waste in your organisation moving forward? And will you use Guardians of Grub to help you measure and reduce food waste? So 30 seconds, please do answer. And don't forget to submit at the bottom there. Perfect. Thank you very much for doing that. Let's have a look at the results. Good grief, that's excellent. So now 97% of you think that food waste should be in the top 3 strategic priorities. I think that was up from about 70% previously. Do you plan to measure? Excellent. I'm really delighted that you're all planning to measure. Thank you so much for that. And it's also great to see that you'll be using Guardians of Grub, and we'll be we'll be delighted to be working with you on that. So thank you very much indeed for that. Really excellent. So it just comes to me to just to talk a little bit about next steps. So the webinar recording will be shared with all the attendees, so you can share it throughout your networks. There's been some excellent discussions in here and some lots of insights. So I hope you'll use the recording within your teams and your wider networks to build an understanding of the need to take a Target Measure Act approach to food waste, and also to underline the importance from a profit perspective, but also from a planet perspective. We'll also send out a follow-up email with all the relevant topics and guidance. And don't forget Target Measure Act to demonstrate your commitment to reducing food waste. And I would also just like to thank the Sustainable Restaurants Association, Too Good To Go, UK Hospitality and Winnow for working with RAP and Guardians of Grub to put forward this event today. And I just wanted to leave you with a few final words, if I may. One of the things is during our webinar, the new global food waste data has been released by UNEP. And you'll see actually the link is actually in the chat. And just wanted to highlight one particular finding, or two particular findings from that. One is that the total amount of food waste in household, retail and hospitality and food service globally is a staggering 931 million tons, more than was thought previously. And there was also an estimate made of hospitality and food service, specifically the waste in that center globally. And that suggests there's around 244 million tons per year of food waste in the hospitality and food service sector globally, or nearly 250 million tons. So what this does is just emphasize the importance of tackling food waste as a central part of us going forward, and the sheer scale of the problem that we all have to work together, not just in the UK, but actually globally. And so finally, if I might just to say, remember that actually tackling food waste is all about reducing your costs and also reducing the impact on the planet. So please do put Target Measure Act at the heart of your response as the sector is opening up, and really let's build back better this time, using the insights you've got from today to make that happen. And if I might just say thank you one more time to everybody for joining. Really appreciate all the speakers for taking time out of your day to come and join us and share your insights. And thank you all for being such a contributive audience and asking some excellent questions. Please use this material, and please, let's build back better. Thank you very much indeed.